Hey, you're listening to Our Children, Our Future. I'm your host, Drake Pearson, and this is the podcast where parents come to listen to find out what is going on for the future of their children and how can they best prepare their children for that future. Today we're talking about teachers, and we're talking about how they're exiting the school system because teachers are exiting that school system in droves still. They were doing this during COVID and they're still doing it now. Why? Because they recognize they can't do much teaching in the school environment. And the reason why is because they're saying kids are not behaving. I saw a teacher say that she feels like a glorified babysitter.
I had to deal with second graders throwing chairs, punching walls, walking out of my classroom. I've had to deal with all these types of behaviors. At the end of the day, I feel like I'm no longer a teacher. I'm no longer an educator. I feel like I'm a glorified babysitter. I feel like I'm a babysitter, and I don't want to be a babysitter.
And here's, again, what we're seeing. Kids are not, quote unquote, behaving in class, and schools don't know what to do about it. Now, I'm putting behavior in quotes because regulating behavior is not something that I agree with when it comes to education. But when you're in large groups, order is required in order to benefit the whole. And that's a good reason why some more conscious parents might consider homeschooling, right? But regardless of whether you homeschool or not, order is not possible if the children themselves cannot organize their own thoughts, which is made 1,000 times harder if you cannot read. That's just a basic skill for organizing your thoughts. Listen to this explanation by a teacher who's in the classroom.
Need to be reinforcing the same stuff that teachers teach in class at home. I need y'all to get how serious the situation is. Today I have a test. I have students who don't want to show up for the test because they cannot read on grade level and they know the test is going to be hard. Because tests are hard and they can't read on grade level, they're going to engage in problem behaviors. Do you know there's a strong correlation between the level of literacy a person has and behavior problems that they have? Do you know that when I first got into my education class, the first thing they said that prisons will determine how many beds they need based on third grade reading scores. Because there's a strong correlation between reading scores, math scores, and behavior problems. I want you to imagine you're a kid and your teacher asks you to read and you're nervous because you know you can't read and people are going to make fun of you. So you do one of two things. Either you make yourself a joke and you start disrupting the class in the hopes that you either get kicked out or you can avoid that situation altogether, or you do something aggressive and get kicked out of class, task avoidance, something like that. Your parents get called, you go home, you get scolded, you get your butt whooped, but you're still not learning, you're not growing, you're not doing anything. All because of something that can be easily avoided by working with your children at home to supplement what they're learning in school. Because 50 minutes is not enough time to teach your child a lot of stuff.
Now, the problem is many children can't read at their grade level. But you know what they can do? They can play video games like they're a pro. They can recite rap lyrics like they're getting paid to. They can tell you all the characters of their favorite shows as if they were their best friends. And this is all on purpose, just so you know. All those things don't require a child to have to think, but just recite. They can passively intake and repeat. There's a clip of Michael Jackson going around right now saying, when a singer performs a song that becomes really popular, the chorus gets stuck in the audience's mind, or whoever's listening to it, and they repeat it over and over like a mantra until it enters their subconscious and they act subconsciously according to those lyrics. Even if they don't necessarily act on it every single time, you know the thought that will enter their mind. And so now when you think of songs that are really popular on the internet or on the radio, whatever, how much of it is actually useful to being a creative thinker and how much of it is actually the opposite of that? In fact, the whole point that Michael Jackson's making is now you have these hordes of people that you know how they're thinking, how they're going to act based on this stimulus. It's not creative. It's according to the message that they've been given. And this happens not just in music, but in commercials and movies and TV shows. So if you're a parent hearing this, or a parent to be, you have to realize how important the music that you let your child listen to is, or how the commercials are like these little earworms that get stuck in their mind and constantly repeat the corporation's message over and over and over again. Or even a family member coming over, how much the words that they say or you say around your little one becomes the thoughts that will repeat in their own minds. So if you've ever had that experience where you heard a commercial, but it's been years since you've last heard that commercial, and then somebody says something and it reminds you of that jingle, you automatically say it out your mouth, right? Silly rabbit. What's the next thing that comes to your mind when you hear that? Or if someone says, mommy, wow. Or if somebody says, ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Or if someone says, I'm just trying to think of all the ones off the top of my head that immediately go into some sort of jingle or commercial that I remember. Or even song lyrics. Sometimes people will say something and it'll automatically trigger the rest of the line of a song. And that happens for me all the time. But you have to realize that is done on purpose. It hijacks the way that you might creatively think. How creative or how much of a love for learning your child has is going to be dependent on what you allow them to consume. And how they talk to themselves is dependent on that too. So what can you do if you want to help your child be able to solve problems and be confident in their abilities? Well, first, you have to realize that their education is in your hands. Whether you're a parent that homeschools or private schools or public schools or whatever kind of method you're using, you have to realize you have to take the full responsibility to educate your child, because even if they're going to classes, it's not going to mean anything if they're not coming in with a base foundation of knowledge. And that base foundation gets created in the home. And if you want to know how to do that, I suggest you go to my website and get my free microbook. In there are a ton of stories and practical understandings of how you can support your child as we realize that more of the institutions we relied on are no longer supportive. And if it really strikes you, there's an opportunity to join our community of parents who are already making a huge difference in their children's lives and education and helping each other to support their children to really be prepared for this future world. And if you like the way that sounds, download the free microbook now at unlockfl.com/microbook. That's unlock with ED like education, FL like for life, unlockedfl.com/microbook. And remember, our kids deserve the best, and we can make that happen.